Now that you're ready to fruit your mushrooms, you need to figure out what kind of container or environment you're going to fruit them in. A lot of mushrooms like oyster or lion's mane, you have them like a wood block, you buy a grow kit, you can fruit them right on your counter by just spraying where they're going to fruit from with a mister bottle and slowly getting further away. It's a very hands-on approach. What I'm going to show you here is how to make a monotub, which is a more hands-off approach. Still hands-on to a certain degree because you're still going to need to provide that moisture unless you set up automated systems like you can see in my fruit chamber video of the one that I have at my own house. However, if you want to create something that's really easy to install in your own home, super cheap to make, you can get all the tools you need at a Home Depot, this is the video for you. So to make a monotub, I'm buying a Perlite container of my chosen size. This one's around 60 quarts. And to make this tub, I'm going to need my drill. I may or may not need my drill bit, depending on the species. I'll get to that in a second. But I'm definitely going to need a hole saw of a chosen size. I like a nice 2-inch hole saw for my top holes. And then if you're fruiting in a smaller container, a 1-inch may be sufficient. And you can also just put more holes as opposed to fewer, which you would need if you used a bigger hole saw. So to make your monotub, you're going to run your hole saw near the top to create holes. If you're doing larger holes, you can do 2 on the long side and then 1 on the ends. If you're making smaller holes, I do suggest adding a few extra holes. Now, as I mentioned before, this depends on the species of whether or not you're going to want to use another bit to make really small holes. If you're making small holes, you're going to put them near the bottom. These small holes' purpose is to allow the CO2 to leave the monotub, and it will allow extra fresh air exchange. This could be important if you're trying to fruit oyster in a tub like this or something else that requires high fresh air environment. You can stay a little bit hands-on and not put a bunch of holes by just opening the lid and doing some fanning of fresh air down into the actual fruiting container. Once I've made my holes all around the sides, then I cover them with some sort of filter patch. This is a synthetic filter disc that you can order easily online. It has an adhesive, so it just stays right there, and it's reusable for a really long time. Additionally, if you don't want to order those things online and you want to go to your craft store, you can pick up that polyfill that you used to make your grain spawn jars. You can also use micropore tape and cover these holes with that as well. However, I find that the micropore tape, due to the stickiness on the inside, often gets very dirty, and I find myself replacing it at least once every 2 uses and sometimes every single use. When you're making your holes, one note of caution is that oftentimes the plastic likes to crack depending on the quality of the plastic. You can run the hole saw backwards, and that will alleviate some of the pressure that causes the plastic to crack up the side. If you do end up cracking your tub, it's not that big of a deal. Just take a piece of micropore tape and run it down the crack, and that'll make sure that it seals it off from anything that could be coming inside. Once again, remember, fruiting mushrooms is not a sterile process, but we want it to remain as clean as possible. So the less likely that you have any extra holes that aren't covered for air to come in with those contaminants, the better. Once you've made your holes, then you can put any mushroom that you're wanting to fruit inside of your monotub. You're simply going to need to humidify the entire inside of the tub by spraying with a mister bottle and then also on top of the lid. You can do this by humidifying the inside of the walls of your monotub, on the bottom of your monotub, and also on the underside of the lid. Additionally, you can put a layer of perlite or vermiculite on the bottom of the tub that'll help hold the moisture longer inside the tub. This helps you be even more hands-off so that you're not constantly spraying it every time that it gets dry. Essentially, if the walls look dry, the mushrooms probably feel dry. So give it a mist on the walls and you should be good to go. I do caution against spraying the actual mushroom too much, as the mushroom could become soggy and then it could get bacterial blotch and it could wilt and just get kind of gross. Mushrooms are already 90% water. They don't need you to give them excess water that they don't know what to do with. So the main things that you want to think about while you're fruiting your mushrooms is, what do my mushrooms look like? Does it need more humidity or does it need more fresh air? Does it need more of both? The way that you're going to determine humidity is that if your mushrooms look soggy or they start getting what we call bacterial blotch, you're going to want to back off on that humidity a little bit. You may even open the lid or put it like this, kind of askew, to allow some of that humidity to come off so that the mushroom dries out a little bit. If the mushrooms are starting to look a little brown, almost like they're drying out, you almost certainly need to increase your humidity. For fresh air requirements, what you're going to want to look for is if your mushrooms are starting to get really leggy or like they're reaching, that means that they're trying to climb to fresh air. Remember, mushrooms breathe oxygen and exhale CO2, so they're going to try to get away from the CO2 and into the fresh air environment. The other indicator that your mushrooms have too high of CO2 pooling is that they'll start to develop fuzzy stems. And this is noticed with extra mycelium growing on the stem itself. It may initially look like a mold growing on the mushroom, but it's probably mycelium if it's fuzzy and white. That's due to having too high a CO2, and you need to increase your fresh air exchange. To increase your fresh air exchange, you can either simply do the hands-on approach and just fan fresh air into your tub, or you can install a small computer fan or even a house fan. Or you could purchase one from a company like House of Hydro that we use to power our humidifiers. Those fans would work perfectly to bring fresh air and excess CO2 out of that fruiting environment.